Hi, my name is Charlotte Waters, Communications Manager for Legal Services of North Florida, and welcome to our virtual Justice on the Block Legal Information Clinic. This clinic is part of the virtual series Know Your Child's Education Rights. To help us learn more about when schools can discipline your children, we have Stephanie Johnson, Senior Attorney in the Tallahassee office at Legal Services, and Cheryl Sattler, Education Advocate with Legal Services of North Florida. This video provides legal information and should not be considered legal advice. This video does not create an attorney-client relationship or substitute legal advice you've been given. You may have defenses that we haven't discussed here, so seeking out an attorney or legal help is always advisable. For more information about LSNF, please go to www.lsnf.org or call 850-385-9007. Thanks for joining us today. Take it away.
Hi, Cheryl. Welcome.
Hey, Steph.
So let's just jump right into it. Today we're talking about discipline, school discipline. So can the school punish my child? And if so, for what?
You know, that's a really great question. And I was thinking about this earlier today. It's great to think about discipline before something happens, right? Because usually we're in the position of saying, is the school allowed to do that? But it's too late because it's already happened. So yeah, the question about discipline is, yes, the school can do an awful lot of things to kids. Florida is one of the few states that still allows them to be paddled. So we have districts that do that. And every district does have one thing, though, in common, and that is that they have a code of conduct. And in Florida law, it's actually called that, a code of student conduct. And that lays out all the rules. So it says, if you do X, this is what can happen. And it's a really important document.
Okay. And does the, oh, sorry.
Go ahead. I was just, so you're a parent and you probably remember every year when you register your son, you get a stack of stuff, right?
Yeah.
So somewhere in there is that code of conduct. Sometimes it's in like the student handbook. Sometimes it's in a planner. Sometimes it's a standalone document. So even though you have tons of stuff that you have to go through, you should really pull that one out and read it.
Well, and I've always found that the codes of conducts are always on the web pages for the district. So that's where I always go whenever I have a discipline case. So does the code just apply to behaviors that are happening on campus?
Great question. And you would think the answer would be yes, right? It's when you're at school, this is the school code of conduct. You would be wrong because students are kind of a special kind of person. And so they don't have all the full rights of adults. And one of those rights that they do not have is if they do something, say, at an after-school program or on the bus, at a school-sponsored activity, or sometimes just even on the weekend or after school. If there's any relationship to school, maybe you fight with a classmate, or the principal feels like because there was this altercation, it's really going to upset the school and people won't be able to learn. Anytime there's any link back to the school is allowed to get involved. And a lot of people don't realize that because, you know, even though kids spend a lot of time in school, they do spend some time out of school, and you can get, in fact, I was over the weekend, there was a child in South Florida who wrote a threat against his school. And he was mad at a teacher. So he said he was going to shoot up the school. Well, now he's in big trouble. He just posted that online. So, you know, was it violent? Well, it was a threat. And we take threats really seriously. But, you know, it was really just a joke from his perspective. Nobody else took it as a joke.
Yeah. Serious times. So I know in about 2 episodes ago, we talked about special education services.
Right.
So if I have a disabled child and I have an IEP, does the code of conduct still apply to that child?
That's a pretty complicated issue. So I'm going to give you a really short answer, and then we have a resource that you can go to if you'd like more information. So the short answer is maybe. If, let's just say that I get speech therapy, right? So I have a verbal issue. Maybe I stutter or I can't say some letters. If I punch a kid in the face, I'm going to get disciplined for that. However, if it were something like, anyway, if the disability is why I did what I did, then things get different. And so they have a big meeting called a manifestation determination, which sounds very serious. And then they decide, okay, was this the disability or was this the child? And if it's the child, we go forward. If it's the disability, then some other things kick in. So there are some specific rights for kids with IEPs.
Okay. And again, we're going to provide a resource if that applies or you want to look further into that. So what types of punishment can the school do?
Yeah, good question. And obviously it depends on what's going on and how old the child is. But, if you started at maybe the really mild end, if your son got in trouble at school, they might call you and they would consider that to be discipline. All the way on the other end, let's just say you make a threat on social media against a school. Well, then you could get expelled. You could get suspended. The school can and does call local law enforcement and get them involved. And there are very specific things that can happen that are in the law where basically if you do this, you get expelled. So if you bring a weapon on campus, you are not going back to that school. And if you make, and I'm just going to look at my law here, a threat or false report involving a school or school's property, transportation, or a school-sponsored activity. In other words, if I threaten to shoot up the school, that's pretty much an automatic expulsion. So there are some rights that kick in when there's a really serious discipline, and getting expelled from school is serious. But there's not a lot of rights. Mm-hmm. So this is one of those things where it's really important to know and to talk to your child and say, look, even if you and I joke about this, even if I say I'm going to kill my boss, that's not cool for you to say because you're a kid and they're going to look at you like you're going to be the next, Marjorie Stoneman Douglas shooter, and bad things are going to happen.
Well, and so speaking of Marjorie Stoneman Douglas, out of that whole incident, there came threat assessments. Can you tell us briefly what a threat assessment is and how it fits into this issue?
Well, and this is another thing that's kind of new and schools are still figuring it out. But basically, there's kind of two levels of things that happen. So something can be an absolute immediate threat, right? You have a kid with a gun on campus. You have a kid who is threatening to commit suicide. So those you deal with because they're an emergency right then. There are other times where a kid makes a threat or says, I've been feeling this. So it's not an absolute emergency, but it really worries school officials. And so they basically open an investigation. It's a lot like what would happen, if you were accused of a crime. They're going to look at grades. They're going to look at mental health reports. They're going to look at health care. They're going to look at the home situation and basically figure out, is this a child who is likely to follow through on something that would be violent or dangerous? And the thing about threat assessment is it's really designed to make sure that a child has supports in place. But because of the way that it's conducted, it can also be very punitive. It can end up with your child being sent to a different school. It can feel very invasive. And I think this is something Florida is trying to work on. But right now it's kind of worrisome.
And just to add to that, one of the big things they look at is social media posts. So it's really important to monitor your child's social media posts because that could get them into a lot of trouble.
Yeah. And, even if your child is posting under another name or posting on Snapchat or one of these other kind of disappearing sites, it's amazing the tools that they have. They can find that stuff. And so, or TikTok. I mean, seriously, there's more and more social media, and there's more and more monitoring of social media. And just in case you're thinking, well, what about free speech? Well, students don't have full free speech rights like adults do.
So what rights does a parent have if they disagree with the action that the school's taking?
And you know what? 99% of the time, they're going to disagree, right?
Right.
Because it's your child, not the school's child. Okay, well, first of all, back to that code of conduct. The school and the district have to follow it, right? So if it says if you wear, the wrong clothes to school, we'll call your parents. They can't turn around and expel you for wearing the wrong clothes. Okay, so they have to follow their own rules. And that sounds like it's just, well, duh, but it's also protection for you because it means that you know what can happen. The second thing is if they're going to do something serious, like suspend a child, which is suspension is when you can't go to school for several days. It's different from expulsion, which is you can't go back to this school or a regular school. So if they're going to get serious about it, they have to try to work with you first. Like they can't go all the way from 0 to 60 without stopping in between. And and they always have to tell you as the parent what's going on, right? They can't just kick your kid out of school and send you home with a note. And the other thing is, if we're talking about expulsion, you do have the right to a hearing and the right to be heard. However, that's not a hearing in a courtroom. It's usually a hearing before the school board, and the school board is generally on the school side. So you have a right to tell your side of the story, but it's kind of it's a stacked deck. There are very few times when, a parent comes before a school board and says, you shouldn't expel my child. And the school board goes, well, of course. Yeah. What were we thinking? We were stupid. So it's a little bit of a right, but it's not that much protection.
Okay. And we don't have time to cover this now, but I believe last year there was some legislation on bullying. So there are some, if your child is being bullied and they react in self-defense, there's some extra measures that can take place.
There's lots of specifics depending on what's going on. And bullying is something that's being taken much more seriously now, in part because we know that it's hurtful for the child who is bullied, but it's also a sign that something's not entirely right with the child who is doing the bullying. And bullying can take place, again, and this is where the school and home life are connected. It can be online, on social media. It can be on, texts on your phone. So all kinds of stuff. I did want to mention one more thing, and that's that whenever there's a really serious punishment, there's generally alternatives. And so you as a parent should always, because what's the worst they can say? No, there are no alternatives. You should always say, is there any alternative to whatever the punishment is? Is there a diversion program? Can my child do community service? What happens if my child writes a letter of apology? So if it gets really serious, you don't have to say, okay, and just go along. Again, though, you have some options, but not always very many rights. So it always pays to, be really nice and professional and courteous because, it's just like anything, right? If you come up and yell at somebody, they're not going to then want to be your friend. Well, if I go and scream at school principal, he's probably or she's probably not likely to say, yeah, let me let you off with a warning. So, just a little common sense there.
It's good advice. Anything else you wanted to say about discipline?
Yes, there is. And it's just this. Codes of conduct are not written to be nice, friendly, easy to read documents. So if there is anything that you don't understand in your code of conduct, ask. Ask the front office, ask the principal, send the principal a note, send the assistant principal a note, because, this is one of those documents that probably most people don't read. And then and nobody says to the school, well, I don't understand this part. Well, guess what? If you don't understand it and you get it wrong, it doesn't matter. They're going to use it against you. So it's safer to ask than, to basically get bashed with it at the end of the day. So you know, like I said, it's not fun reading, but it's important reading. And I would read it with my child, you know, because they're the ones who are going to be expected to follow it.
Well, and a lot of schools now are making the child also sign the slip saying that they read the code of conduct and went through it with
But
their parents.
it's so easy to just
I
sign,
know.
you know, you're signing all this
I
stuff,
know.
and it's not like they give you a quiz.
Right, right.
So
Maybe they should. Maybe they should.
well,
Parents,
being at school is
parents
the
need
quiz.
more quizzes. All right. Well, this has all been super useful information, Cheryl. Thank you. And we're going to have a couple of resources up in the chat. And one is on if your kid is a special education kid,
Right.
what the process is if that child is disciplined through the school system. So, and I just want to remind you that our next and final Facebook Live event in our education series is going to be on April 14th. And in that session, we're talking about rights for children where English is their second language. So thank you all for joining us.
Awesome. Thanks, staff.